Mhm.
Good morning, everybody. We are live here in sunny Central New York. I am Anthony Marrone from the Marrone Law Firm, joined by a special guest today, Melissa Seifter from Aging Advocates, CNY. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Anthony. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for doing this conversation. So we're going to talk today about a topic that is near and dear to both of our hearts, which is how to help a loved one gain access or gain admission to a nursing home. So just a little bit of background about each of us before we get started. I am an elder law attorney. So what that means is we do a lot of work helping families gain access to nursing home care and all different kinds of long-term care, and work through some of the financial and legal issues that are associated with that type of care. So we do a lot on the legal and financial side when folks need nursing home care. And Melissa, tell us a little bit about your involvement.
Sure. So I recently started this care management business called Aging Advocates, CNY. And my background is actually in senior housing. I've worked in several different assisted living communities, memory care, and helped with placement for folks of various needs. So discussing the process to a nursing home admission is something I am looking forward to discussing.
Yeah, so we're going to get it started here with what's the first step? So if I'm someone who is either I've got a family member or maybe a loved one that I think needs more care than they're receiving now, what's the first? Is there a medical evaluation, or what's the first step in the process?
So the first step for anybody looking to get into a nursing home who is coming from the community, so not the hospital, is to meet with your primary care physician and have an order for what's called a PRI. So a PRI stands for Patient Review Instrument, and it is what nursing homes in New York State use to accept somebody. So that is actually done by a licensed, usually nurse or home care provider.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to be looking at the person's medical needs, different behavior issues, concerns there, and they basically score them, and that's what the nursing home looks at to see how much care is this person going to need hands-on. We can talk a little bit more about that after. So that's the first step, is to get the PRI. It's only good for 30 days. So it's not something you just want to do out of curiosity. It's something you really want to do when you know that you are looking to go into a nursing home.
So you want to be ready, either in a hospital, ready for discharge, or ready to move in within the next month, basically.
Sure. If you just have questions whether or not you need a nursing home level of care, that's something that you can speak to your doctor about, or a nurse or a care manager, and they can say, yes, you are eligible, ready for nursing home level, or maybe you don't need that quite yet.
And I guess, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think here it's helpful I have a lot of clients that struggle with, the various levels of care, right? Mm-hmm. So when we say nursing home, skilled nursing, really what we mean is that's a true nursing home where people are going to live. Mm-hmm. There are lower levels of care, less, what would you call it? Like less invasive levels of care that are kind of sit underneath that. You want to just hit those real quick?
Sure. So skilled nursing is really meant for people that need hands-on medical care. Okay, so maybe they need help with all of their activities of daily living, as far as getting dressed, all of their medications, showers, but then maybe they are on dialysis or have another true medical need. Okay, and those cannot be always addressed in a lower level of care.
Right.
Independent living, which is a type of community where you're going to have access to meals, maybe housekeeping, activities. It's a safe environment, but they're not going to be treating you, medically. Assisted living, they might do a little bit more hands-on care. You need help with those medications, things like that. But when you are looking at having several medical needs and true hands-on assistance needed, that's when you might be looking at a nursing home.
Yeah, and the PRI is very helpful for all of us to kind of figure out what level of care might be most appropriate. It's certainly not the be all end all, but it's what healthcare professionals and those of us that kind of operate in this space use to kind of indicate, okay, these are the types of facilities we should be looking at for someone. Right. So getting the PRI is huge.
Yep. So, and the nitty gritty truth about the PRI is that comes into play for a nursing home for their reimbursement from Medicaid.
Oh yeah, give us the behind the scenes.
Here's the truth. Okay, so they're going to be looking at your score, and just like any other business, there's a financial incentive there. Okay, so somebody who requires more hands-on care is going to have a certain score that is going to allow for more reimbursement from Medicaid. Okay, so somebody who needs more hands-on care might be more desirable to a certain nursing home.
Which actually may seem counterintuitive to the general public, because you probably, a lot of my clients are thinking, well, if mom or dad or grandma or grandpa is really difficult and needs a lot of help, the nursing homes won't want that because it's too much work. But you're saying actually, in some cases, it can actually mean more money.
Right. So in some cases, it could mean more money. However, if you are attaching a high medical need to a behavioral concern, that might also make you less desirable to that nursing home. So people don't realize, but it's kind of like trying to find the perfect fit sometimes. And a nursing home might already have folks that are that have a certain high level of need, and they don't want somebody to come in with that need, because then it's going to throw off their ability to care for those folks in that particular unit or house, however they have their model set up. So a nursing home admission is not cut and dry. So they are going to look at, like I said, your PRI score, and they may then be looking at what is their current caseload, and is that person going to fit in well? Can they manage their needs?
Mm-hmm.
They're also going to be looking at the financial application.
Yeah.
So
yeah, let's talk money.
Let's talk money. Money equals options, just like in any other area of life.
Welcome to America, right?
Yeah, you've got money, you've got choices.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that is unsettling to a lot of people, or at least where I get a lot of phone calls and emails, is someone is in the hospital and they're trying to get admission or discharge into a nursing home, and the facility has asked them to fill out these applications, right? Mm-hmm. And really what they're trying to find out, typically, at least in my opinion, is they're looking for people that have the ability to pay, right? That if all else being equal, the cost in a nursing home ranging from $13,000 to $14,000 per month in Syracuse right now, the nursing homes are trying to evaluate who has the financial ability to pay and who may need some kind of government resources to pay, right? Is that kind of the vibe you get?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So generally speaking, if you are Medicaid eligible, Medicaid pending, you already have the application done, your options are going to be fewer than if you have private pay available funds to pay for, say, 3 to 9 months. You're going to have a lot more doors open for you.
Yeah.
There are a select few nursing homes in this area that will only even consider somebody who can private pay for even a few years. And at an average cost of about $475 a day, we're looking at hundreds of thousands, if not $500,000, to get into some of these places.
I always say it's the most expensive, worst hotel stay you'll ever have.
Absolutely.
You know, just
absolutely.
The cost is crazy. So before we go on anymore, I want to encourage you guys. We got a bunch of people watching. Feel free to leave us comments. We're going to take questions as they come in, and we'll leave some time at the end as well. So feel free to post your questions. Anything that you have that's nursing home, long-term care, elder care related, we're happy to discuss. But kind of sticking on the financial topic, you mentioned people that might need Medicaid. So maybe this is a good time to talk about how that system works. Do you want me to give my little spiel? Is this my Medicaid spiel time?
Absolutely. Can you just clarify what's the difference between Medicaid and Medicare? Because I know I'm asked that all the time. I'm sure there's people watching that have no idea. Because why would you until you need it?
It's a great question. So Medicare is the federal health insurance for people that are 65 and older. So when you turn 65 or when you're about to turn 65, you get all this mail from the government telling you that you have to sign up for Medicare Part A and Part B. And then there's other options for prescription drug coverage and supplemental coverage. Medicare is your health insurance. Medicaid is a federal and state program that's administered in each county that provides a subsidy if you need long-term care. So Medicare, your health insurance, will generally not pay for anything beyond simple rehab. So think of I'll use my grandma, for example. She fell in her apartment, broke her knee, needed to have surgery at the hospital, and then needed to go to a nursing home to rehabilitate the broken leg or the broken knee. So Medicare would pay for that rehabilitation stay. There's some additional rules that apply, but Medicare, her health insurance, would pay for up to 100 days in the nursing home if she's met certain qualifications. She had to be admitted to the hospital for 3 days in order to gain that coverage. And then she also had a co-insurance payment, like a copay, for days 21 through 100. So most Medicare plans, the first 20 days are covered in full. And then days 21 through 100 are typically, you're going to have some co-insurance payment. Beyond that, if you need care beyond the 100-day level, Medicare, your health insurance provides no coverage. And I think it's important to also note, because a lot of people say, well, I have a really great retirement health insurance through my employer, right? Or I have Excelis. They also won't pay anything beyond the simple rehab. So when you run out of those days, whether you've hit 100 days or the doctors say sooner than that, you're cut off, that becomes the pivotal moment for us to figure out, do you have enough money where you're going to fork over $15,000 a month? Or do we need to apply for Medicaid so that they can subsidize the cost of your care? Does that make sense? It's not great that they name these things, so closely together.
So the long and the short of that is Medicare is not in play for long-term care, nursing home, generally speaking. It comes into play if you are going into a short-term rehab, which is also confusing because they are in the same place.
Same building, yeah.
So every nursing home has a short-term rehab. Yep. The short-term rehab side is, as its name supposed to be, for a short term, get your strength back, recover from a surgery, things like that, then get back to your normal living environment. The long-term care side of that is somebody who is a permanent resident. They may still be getting some therapy services, which is where Medicare might come into play for a few days here and there, but generally speaking, completely different as far as the payer source there.
Yeah, and one of the things to keep in mind about Medicaid, so if you're moving into, or you have someone moving into a nursing home where that's going to be where they're living, Medicaid is a means-tested program. So you have to have low enough assets on paper in order to qualify for Medicaid in the first place. So they won't just take you if you've got $200,000 in a bank account. You're not going to be eligible for Medicaid. So the rules are a little bit different depending on if you're married versus single. And then there's certain types of assets that you're allowed to keep regardless of whether you're married or single. So if all of your money is in an IRA or 401k, and that's it, you have no other assets beyond that, no house, no car, no money, just your IRA, you will qualify for Medicaid. But when you start to layer in a house, some money in the bank, some savings, some stocks, maybe you've got a vacation property, that's when things start to get really complicated from a Medicaid perspective. Most of my work in this space is taking folks that have those assets and trying to help them not have to sell everything and go broke to get on Medicaid. So there are strategies that we use to help take someone who may be over the Medicaid limit, they have too many assets to qualify, and on paper get them under the Medicaid limit legally so that they can qualify for Medicaid and not have to lose, the house, the car, the vacation property, their savings, all that stuff. There's ways to do it. There's strategies that we use to do it. It's very tricky and it's time sensitive. I think probably the theme that you and I share in this space is planning in advance is way better than waiting till there's a crisis, right? That doing this stuff years before, or even a year before you may need this level of care, is going to put you in such a better position.
Yeah, so can you touch on the Medicaid look back so people understand a little bit more of the importance of doing that ahead of time?
So because the government loves to make things fun and exciting, there's now 2 separate Medicaid look back periods. So what the Medicaid look back is a period of time where Medicaid is going to conduct an audit of your finances. They're going to look at all your bank statements, all of the transactions you've made, and they're trying to see if you've given away anything or changed ownership of any assets to try to qualify for Medicaid. What they're trying to prevent is, my grandma has a stroke, we transfer $500,000 to ourselves today, and she goes into the nursing home tomorrow on Medicaid. They're trying to prevent that. So for nursing homes, the Medicaid look back period is now 5 years. And it's been 5 years for some time, and there's no indication it's going to lengthen in the near future. What that means is if I'm doing a Medicaid application for someone, I have to provide 60 months worth of financial statements for every bank account, every tax return, every stock account. It can get, I happen to have one right here. This is for someone who has 2 bank accounts. So Anthony has had to go through all of this and determine whether they gave away any money. Are they going to be eligible for Medicaid? Hopefully it'll be smooth sailing for us. So it's a 5-year look back, which means you want to, if you're going to give away anything and do any kind of advanced planning, ideally you'd want it to be more than 5 years before you need care. So you really got to be thinking about this when you're in your 60s and 70s, I think. 60s is better, but 70s it will still work for most people. I usually say around the time of retirement is the time to do that advanced planning. Mm-hmm. Just so you know, on the assisted living side, because there is some select assisted living residences that take Medicaid, not very many, but there's a few. The look back period, there used to be no look back period up until this year. Now there is a 2.5-year look back period for assisted living. So if you need assisted living at one of the Loretto facilities, which are basically the only ones that offer Medicaid here in town, they're going to look back for 30 months through your finances to see if you've given away any assets. And it used to be there was no look back. So I could do planning for someone to go into an assisted living facility. I could do that planning today, and they could qualify for Medicaid November 1st, next month. That's no longer the case. So we've got, a bunch of balls in the air that we're trying to juggle here in terms of the planning. And it gets really tricky. The earlier, the better, I think, is the lesson.
Mm-hmm. The earlier, the better. And then one thing I do so appreciate about you, Anthony, is that you are realistic with families in helping them understand if you protect all of your money and you don't leave your loved one with any, available funds for care, that's everyone's decision. But at the end of the day, what is important to you and your family? Do you want your loved one to have options? So that's something to put into consideration there.
We do what we call a runway calculation, if you think of like an airplane. So once the family has told us kind of what the financial situation is and what their income situation is like, we prepare a series of projections based on, if you're really aggressive and you want to give all the money away and hide all the money, here's what that looks like. If you want to be a little more moderate, and leave some money so that if you need to hire a caregiver or care manager, you've got the cash flow to do that. Well, that's what this will look like. So we provide a series of options to the families where they can pick how aggressive or kind of balanced, I would say, they want to be in terms of the planning. And most folks, I would say they want, I don't think I've ever had anyone except one gentleman who has wanted to move into the nursing home. It's generally not a desirable thing for most people. It happens by virtue of circumstance and lack of other options. But so I would say most people are very receptive to my idea of keeping a certain amount of money unprotected, so to say, to pay for a care manager or to pay for an aide to come in and provide companion care, to stop having to go to the nursing home, right? Like the goal is to prevent that,
right?
But also to be prepared if that becomes an inevitability, right? Like certain things happen that are beyond anyone's control. I think where Melissa and I kind of share an outlook on this is you take all the circumstances that the clients present and try to game out like what's the best outcome here, but also let's prepare for if it doesn't go that way, right? Like we cannot control someone having a stroke and needing nursing home care. That's just beyond any of us. And without a crystal ball, it's kind of difficult to guess what's going to happen. So we've got to be as planners and managers, we've got to be kind of able to lay out for the clients, well, these are the different options that are going to be in front of you.
Right. Can you answer, when does somebody need an attorney to do their Medicaid application?
That's a good question. So I would say when they've got some assets to lose. So if I'm someone that's already at the Medicaid limit, meaning I've got less than $15,750 in cash and really no other assets, maybe a house, but no other assets, we typically won't do the Medicaid application, or we'll encourage them to work with the nursing home. A lot of the nursing homes will actually do this for the family. The reason for that is that there's not anything for the lawyer to really do. We're not protecting anything. We don't have to use any planning strategies to protect those assets. So most of the time, those cases we're not working on. Where it gets tricky is if you're married, right? And you've got what's called a community spouse, a spouse who's not in the nursing home and one who is. And if you have, over the $15,000 in assets, particularly for me, my sweet spot is people that have more than $100,000 in cash or stocks, or they've got multiple pieces of real estate. I've got a house and a camp, or a house and a rental property, because usually then it's worth protecting those assets. So they're, you saw the size of this is actually a smaller one, but you saw the size of the Medicaid application. Like it's a lot of work. We're manually going through and doing all of that. It's not inexpensive. So I say that to make the juice worth the squeeze, you've got to have some assets worth protecting. So for me, it's folks that are 6-figure net worth and up, but that is inclusive of things like real estate. So a lot of people get there fast, depending on what they own. And the upward cap, I would say, for people on Medicaid is going to be probably about $5 million in assets. Once you go over that, it becomes very tricky to kind of shoehorn you into Medicaid. And my personal opinion is if you've got, for folks that are north of 5 million in net worth, they should probably be paying for the care. And kind of like you said, they're probably going to get into a nicer, if you privately pay, they're likely going to get into one of the, 5-star or 4-star rated facilities versus, the reality of the places that take Medicaid, which is they're not perceived to be as nice as the ones that are more private pay, right? Like that's the
right. So I'd love to touch on that quickly.
Yeah.
Because I often am helping families who, you are faced with your options, and your option, I always say your worst option could be someone else's best option or vice versa. So as far as all the facilities go, also similar to everything in healthcare, you could have a good experience or a terrible experience at the same place. Every nursing home does take Medicaid, right?
Yeah.
And some do have better surveys from the state, which you can really look at right on their website. And some are much, nicer looking than others.
Right.
However, it really is case by case on what is that individual's need. Different places do have different specialties, whether it's for dementia or a cardiac need or dialysis. Certain medical needs do shine in different facilities versus others. So just because your neighbor or your friend says, "Oh, don't go to that place, it's terrible," it's not that cut and dry. Do your own research. Find out, are they going to be able to meet my mom's needs, mom or dad or grandma, whomever. And it really comes down to that caregiver. I always hear stories of, I thought this place would be horrible. My loved one had the best caregiver ever. So, your options might seem grim at one point or another, but, there's so many factors that do go into a nursing home. So just something to consider and keep in the back of your mind when you're looking at your options.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I find helpful is working with someone like Melissa, who kind of has boots on the ground and has experience with all the facilities, right? So you're able to kind of give that almost behind the scenes look at, well, even though this place may take Medicaid and may not look as nice as that other facility, right? They don't have mahogany paneled library that no one's ever in. The actual level of care we think is very good for taking Medicaid. So I think that's where a care manager, someone that's got experience in the industry, is invaluable because they can kind of navigate that terrain. And the one thing I'd say, this is really hard in COVID times, right? We haven't really talked about how crazy this is now, right? So we're still in the middle of a pandemic, right? Are you able to go into every facility, or what's that look like? Like, is it different facility by facility, or how is that looking right now?
It's facility by facility, as a step down from whatever's mandated by the state, of course. So there was a long period there where it was completely no visitors at all. And that was really eye-opening to me personally. I felt like it really shed some light on how some facilities handled that really difficult time. I feel like some were more creative than others. Some were, maybe shut their doors and sort of used that as a correction, for lack of a better term. But some places really, truly shine, getting creative with making sure that their residents were still having a great quality of life and still connected to families. During a really hard time. I mean, if anybody has been suffering during this pandemic, and a lot of people have, it's been the folks in the nursing home and their families. Not being able to see your loved one when you live right down the street and you're used to visiting them every day. I mean, I can't think of anything worse.
Right.
A lot of these places are opening back up as far as them doing limited visitation. Still, I'd say most of the places in this area have done a great job with keeping, the spread of the virus, keeping it under bay, and having good protocols and procedures for new admissions, keeping them, separate from other residents, or having people that were tested positive separate, still meeting their needs. So overall, I'd say I've seen a lot of great things in the nursing homes, but yeah, just a really, really hard time. So another recommendation, if you are looking into a nursing home admission, is to ask, how did you handle the pandemic? What were your procedures and protocols? How did you keep, these loved ones connected to their families? I think those are really good questions to ask right now.
Yeah, I agree. And we're still in a place where there's restrictions at a lot of facilities. There's now legislation that I know has been introduced by Senator Rachel May to kind of allow one caregiver per person that could go into a facility regardless of whether there's a COVID case, if they do some testing. So it seems like the state is kind of starting to now react to what those of us that do this work have been seeing for the past 7 months, which has been just tragic and awful. for me, it really kind of brings into perspective how, which I've always known, but kind of never been so confronted with, that the kind of system-wide disrespect to the elderly nationwide is just kind of shocking in this space. Like it's very concerning to me. I sit on a New York State Bar Association task force on this, and we have weekly calls, and it is really troubling to hear the lack of reaction from the state on some of these issues, particularly for folks who need that, like where the companion or the family member serves almost as an aide or a worker in the facility, you know? So hopefully this is kind of changing soon, but I agree. If you're working to get someone admitted to a facility, and you don't know which one you want to be in, for sure, one of the questions to ask is, how did you deal with it? How are you dealing with it, right? Because in most of these facilities, there's still positives popping up. Right. And it seems like it's been not prejudicial. Like the facilities that are seen as really nice have had cases, and the facilities that are seen as, 100% Medicaid have had cases. So this is not going away in the facility context. And I think you've got to be asking the questions, right? So I am going to, if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'm going to show, if you want to email Melissa, this is her email address at the bottom. And do you have any closing remarks or anything else you want to ask?
Can you maybe summarize again on Medicaid? Yeah, just a quick summary.
Oh, yeah. Anthony, take your 10 years of work.
I know, right? Come on, freely.
Sure.
Right, listen up.
This is an elevator speech for sure.
Okay, can you review the Medicaid? Because I just was thinking the Medicaid look back for assisted living for community-based Medicaid. Is that in effect now, or is that going to be happening? Can you just clarify?
We're still fighting with the state.
Okay.
New York State Bar Association is still fighting with the state of New York to defer its effective date to January 1st.
Okay.
But any transfers that take place, I mean, this doesn't make a ton of sense now anyways, but any transfers or gifts that took place after October 1st are subject to the 2.5-year penalty. So we're kind of in it now. Okay. But if you submit a Medicaid application in October, November, or December, the likelihood is that won't take effect until January. So if you've done a transfer, 2 years ago, and you're applying for community Medicaid now, the likelihood is they will not penalize you for it.
Okay.
But we're in this no man's land of, well, we don't really know if it's going to be, which is great because the law was supposed to go into effect 15 days ago. So typical government. This happens at all levels of government. It's not specific to the state of New York, where we're already into the effective period of the law, and it's unclear whether it's going to be enforced or how it's going to be enforced. So we're still fighting with the state on that. What people should know is this stuff doesn't just happen in a vacuum. There are lobbying groups, both for the lawyers like me that do this work have a lobbying group, and also facilities have a lot of lobbying groups that work with the state legislature and the New York State Department of Health on these issues to advocate for consumers. So it's not as if the consumer is just getting totally disregarded. There's a lot of kind of behind the scenes fighting that goes on with the governor's office, the New York State legislature, and never, right? And lobbyists that are pushing back against some of these changes. What happened was in April of this year, when they passed the New York State budget, they realized that we were going to have all kinds of economic problems as a result of the pandemic. So in order to save some money, they created this look back period for assisted living Medicaid where it didn't exist prior. So that's a cost saving measure. That's exactly what they're trying to do. So it's interesting, and there is this unresolved question still about when it's going to be effective, but we're quite certain that it's going to be pushed back to January 1st, so that if you do need assisted living Medicaid in the next 3 months, now is the time to do it. Like now would be the time to make that move what I would say here in Syracuse that is helpful is there's not very many facilities that take Medicaid for assisted living. You've probably got a handful, I think, right, of places that will accept Medicaid for someone who requires assisted living, which is kind of that step below nursing home care.
Right.
So you don't have a ton of options in that space if you need Medicaid.
Right.
Unlike nursing homes where every nursing home takes Medicaid, assisted living is a much more narrow group of places.
Right. They're mainly private pay.
You know, and they're going to be, since we're talking about it, they're going to be assisted living probably what you say, a third of the price, a half the price of nursing home generally, roughly, or lower, depending on where you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't make me do math in my head. The average of a nursing home per month.
It's cheaper.
Is what? Okay.
$5,000, $6,000, depending on, yeah.
Average cost of assisted living, and not memory care, I'd say is about $4,000.
There you go. So that's monumentally cheaper than a $15,000 nursing home bill. So
correct.
So a lot, and then a lot of our work, probably more of your work, I would say, but some of my work is helping identify those other options short of a nursing home where someone can both maybe privately pay and kind of have what I call a longer runway, going back to my plane analogy. And, normally, at least in the assisted living facilities I've been in, it tends to be a better quality of life, right? You've got people that are more ambulatory. I used to go to the one in Liverpool all the time on Friday because they would do pizza, wings, and beer on Friday night. So
yeah, those places are fun. People are amazing. A nursing home, you might think is going to be more end of life, but I think of assisted living as like you're going there to live. A lot of these people are coming from home or they've been isolated, so there can be an improvement in quality of life there. Yeah,
we've got a question from Anne. She says, do I have to come in and review our planning with any change in the look back period? I would say generally no. If you've done estate planning and long-term care planning and you have a trust, which is what we would normally do, there's nothing in my practice, there's nothing that's changed with the look back. If you haven't completed a trust, now's the time to do it. But for those that have done the trust planning and kind of settle all that in advance, I always will write to my clients if there's anything that needs to be done in terms of updates and changes in the law. But for folks that have already completed the planning, we're generally not having them come back in because there's nothing that we would change necessarily. That's a great question, though. Thanks, Ann. Any other topics that we want to talk about, or anything we didn't cover?
So I'll just summarize quickly again. So the steps to a nursing home admission, step one is you have to get an order for a PRI from your doctor. That is the screen done by a nurse that is then submitted with your application to a nursing home anywhere in New York State. So you cannot proceed with an admission without having that done. Okay, step one, PRI, along with a financial application, which is where they want to see, do you have those private pay funds? Are you eligible for Medicaid? Is there going to be any issues with you getting Medicaid? That's where if you do have funds, if you've moved funds, make sure you talk to an attorney. As far as the Medicaid application, do you do it yourself? Do you hire an attorney? If you've got funds, you want to work with an attorney. If you're already Medicaid eligible, which is how much, Anthony? Medicaid eligible limit?
$15,750 if you're single, $90,270 if you're married.
Thank you. Then check with the facility that you're interested in. If they have a finance department, like Loretto does have a great finance department, they might help you with that application. Other places will refer you maybe to somebody in the community to help.
We've got that's a great summary. Thank you. We've got a question somewhat related. Can you explain what a supplemental needs trust is?
Ooh.
I will. A supplemental needs trust is a trust that's designed for someone who's on Medicaid, but normally not someone who's in a nursing home. So there's all types of services that Medicaid will subsidize. Assisted living is one of them. but also care in the community. So folks that might live in a group home or some kind of other residential setting are receiving Medicaid to help pay for that care. A supplemental needs trust is designed for those folks that may actually have some assets. Maybe they inherited money from their parents, or they were in some kind of accident and they became disabled and they got a settlement from the accident. Supplemental needs trust is a creation of federal law that says you can actually keep that money in a certain type of trust that Medicaid approves, and the money can be used to pay for things that Medicaid won't cover. So I'll give an example. I have a gentleman who I'm in charge of his trust. I'm the trustee, and he lives in a group home. And so Medicaid pays for the group home. He pays all of his income, his Social Security goes to help pay for that care. And then Medicaid picks up the tab for the difference. The money that we have in the supplemental needs trust that he inherited from his brother is used to pay for things that Medicaid won't pay for. So he loves horror movies. He's just like super into horror movies. So the trust pays for a subscription to, the guy's got more subscriptions than I know. Hulu, Netflix, every video subscription that you can have. There's one specifically for horror movies. The trust pays for that. The trust pays for him to go to OCC. They have a great program at OCC for people with developmental disabilities where they can go and actually be in college for a few weeks and have specific programming for that. The trust pays for that. In normal times, the trust would pay for him to go on trips. So the supplemental needs trust is designed to supplement what Medicaid won't cover for someone who is indigent or has a disability. So it's a great question. It does not work well in a nursing home environment because there's certain Medicaid rules that restrict the ability to have a supplemental needs trust for the most part if you're 65 and older. If you had one when you were younger than 65, that's different. But for someone who's, let's say I'm 80 and I inherit some money and I'm already living in a nursing home, the supplemental needs trust won't work for someone like that. But if it was set up when you're under 65, for the most part, the supplemental needs trust is going to protect that money. And then it depends on if you don't spend all the money before you pass away, depending on where the money originally came from, you may have to pay it back to the government. So if the money was originally your money, maybe you got a car accident or you had the money to begin with, and then you pass away, that money actually gets paid back to Medicaid. So if Medicaid spent $1 million paying for you, they'll get paid back from what's in the trust. But if the money was someone else's, let's say it was an inheritance that was left to you, then Medicaid does not get paid back. So it's a tricky, probably could be when I teach this to lawyers, it's usually 3 or 4 hours, but that's kind of a high level summary of supplemental needs trust. And they work great for folks that are under 65.
Well, thank you. I learned something new.
There you go. We've got a lot of people saying thank you. People love your background, so that's great. I love it too. But what about my background? Come on, guys.
Yeah, funny story. I showed Anthony all my background options yesterday, and this was the winner.
Yeah, we workshopped this, as they say. We workshopped this the background. It's very nice. It's got all the things. I like it.
Yeah. Okay, one other quick trust question. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's millions that we could ask, but and this isn't really nursing home related, but pooled trust, is that something that you can speak to?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. A pooled trust is a type, not to make it more complicated, but we're lawyers, so this is what we do. A pooled trust is a type of supplemental needs trust. Normally, in most instances, the pooled trust is designed for someone who's going to be either living in an assisted living facility paid for by Medicaid or in the community on what's called community Medicaid. So think of like my gentleman in a facility, in a group home.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, the pooled trust is designed to take your income. So different than an asset, right? Different than inheriting money or getting some kind of settlement. If let's say I've got $3,000 a month in income, and Medicaid says that if I live in an assisted living facility, I'm allowed to keep, what's the number? $875, let's say, a month. Normally, the government would require me to pay that difference to the county, whereas some counties are different. Some places you pay it to the county, Some places you pay it to the facility. So that would be about $2,000 a month. I'd just be forking over to the county. So the federal government came along and said, well, wait, what we're going to let you do is give this money to a nonprofit organization, and that nonprofit manages it for you, and they will pay certain bills for you if you submit them. So if you have like a utility bill or some, you can use that money to pay for things. The trade-off is that when you pass away, the money stays with the nonprofit. So a lot of facilities, Loretto, which is kind of the big nursing home operator in Onondaga County, has a pooled trust for their residents. My firm prepared the pooled trust for St. Luke, which is the big player in Oswego County, right when you come into the city of Oswego up on the right. And for their assisted living facility, we prepared their pooled trust. So for those residents that may have what's called a spend down, which is their income is over that $875 a month, they put their money in the pooled trust, and then they can still use it. They don't have to give it back to the government. They could still use it to pay legitimate bills and be on Medicaid at the same time.
So my understanding is that you can actually enroll in the Loretto Pooled Trust without actually being a Loretto resident.
That's true.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I wish we had somebody from Loretto Finance Department tell me if I'm wrong. But every time they speak, I learn something new. And I feel like that's the best kept secret, that you could be in the community on Medicaid and enroll in the pooled trust and then be able to use that excess income towards anything that is to improve the quality of life of that person, is my understanding.
So Loretto's, as far as I know, the only Onondaga County-based pooled trust. So if you want a local option, they're the only option in Onondaga County. There's another one that I use a lot for people who are disabled and living in the community, which is called NYSARC, NYSARC, NYSARC.org. They're the original pooled trust in New York State, kind of the platinum standard statewide. There's no restrictions in terms of which one you enroll in. There's a bunch, and you can enroll in whatever one. There's certain fees that go along with it, so you've got to obviously be willing to pay the cost. But Loretto's a great one. I'm partial to the St. Luke's one because Anthony wrote it. But NYSARC is the one we use for people generally who may be living in a group home or in the community, not in a nursing home or assisted living facility. But they're all great. It's a great tool, especially if you have excess income on a monthly basis, and can really improve the quality of life for folks who are on Medicaid. So it's a really essential kind of tool that we use for folks who are not in the nursing home, but assisted living and lower. Mm-hmm. We've got some more questions now. What is the recourse for those deemed Medicaid ineligible by the state? Oof. Well, this can mean a lot of different things, Donna. It's a great question. It depends. I know that's a just like crappy lawyer answer, but if you're deemed Medicaid ineligible because you have too much money or you're over-resourced, your options are either you should definitely see an attorney, but mostly that you have to do what's called a spend down, which is you've got to take your resources, which may be up here, and spend them down until they hit the Medicaid level. Mostly that's done through paying your nursing home bill, if you're in a nursing home. If it was an error, like you think that they made a mistake in the determination, you can appeal the decision. So through the Medicaid process, they have what's called a fair hearing where you can appeal a decision that went against you. I sometimes call them not fair hearings, but that's just me. That's just my opinion. But so that would be depending on why you were deemed ineligible. If it was because you had too much money, then you've got to spend down and you should talk to a lawyer. If it's because there was a mistake or some kind of error, you can appeal it, but those appeals are time sensitive, very time sensitive to when you got the decision. And you can do the appeal on your own, or we do a lot of the appeals for folks. Any more questions? The questions came in at the end. It was good though. We'll probably do a bunch more of these. What do you think?
With me?
Yeah, you. She's like, no, get me out of here.
We have endless topics, as you know. I mean, this is really, supposed to be about the nursing home admission process. Obviously, we talked about Medicaid because that goes hand in hand, but we could go much deeper into finding the right nursing home for your situation, finding the right assisted living,
what does a care manager do?
Strategies to stay home. Almost everybody says, I want to remain in my home. I don't want to go to a nursing home. I don't want to go to an assisted living. But that takes some planning and some good luck. So the moral of the story overall here is don't wait till a crisis to address these tough topics.
Yeah.
Picking where you're going to spend, or your loved one's going to spend the rest of their life potentially while in the hospital under pressure is not ideal. So
agreed.
Plan ahead where you can.
And, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. This is going to be archived on our respective Facebook pages. And maybe if you have ideas or questions for topics that you'd like to hear in the future, let us know in the comments if you're not watching this live. And we'll leave it at that. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for watching. Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks, Melissa.